Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 19121 in the name of Maurice Golden on the Dog Theft Scotland Bill at stage 1. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Maurice Golden, the member in charge of the bill, to speak to and move the motion around 7 minutes. Mr Golden.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'd also like to thank my team as well as the parliamentary clerks, in addition to the additional member in charge of the bill, Christine Graham. It is a privilege to stand here today, and I do so on behalf of dog owners and lovers across Scotland, as well as, of course, dogs themselves, and indeed anyone who is passionate about animal welfare, principles of justice and societal well-being. It was American naturalist and animal welfare campaigner Roger Caras who said, "Dogs are not our whole life, but they make our lives whole." As any dog lover will attest, they most certainly do. A dog is not an item. It is man's best friend, according to George Graham Vest. Indeed, dogs are valued and loved members of the family, of individuals and of neighbourhoods and communities more widely. Losing a dog is heartbreaking and traumatic, whatever the circumstances. Losing a dog as a result of theft compounds that trauma. Stealing a family pet, whether for financial reward or any other reason, is a wicked act and should be treated accordingly by the law. Currently, if a dog is stolen, the crime would be prosecuted under the common law of theft. This is the same as the theft of any other item, such as a bike, television, clock or the like. I don't believe that this reflects the sentient nature of dogs, the emotional attachment between owner and dog, or the impact on the wider family that the loss of a dog has. Nor does it reflect the pain and trauma that is experienced by the dog. That is why I, and indeed many others, including 97% of respondents to my consultation, believe that the bill is both necessary and a priority. And there is precedent out there. At a UK level, dog theft is now a standalone offence established by the Pet Abduction Act 2024. And there are other cases of standalone statutory offences in Scots law, where an act is already illegal under common law. Most notably, among those is the Protection of Retail Workers Scotland Act 2021, which was a members' bill in the last session of Parliament, piloted through the Parliament by Daniel Johnson. That act created a new standalone offence for assaulting, threatening or abusing retail workers while they are on duty. In terms of my bill, and I'll go through each part in turn. First of all, it makes dog theft a specific statutory offence, with penalties of up to 12 months in prison in summary proceedings and 5 years under solemn proceedings, and/or a fine up to the statutory maximum in summary proceedings and an unlimited fine in solemn proceedings. The bill provides for victims of dog theft to be able to make a statement to court telling of the impact and trauma of the loss of the dog. This would mean they can tell the court the full impact on them and the dog itself of the theft, and I note there have been wider developments in relation to victim statements, and I will cover that particular issue in closing. The bill provides for a statutory aggravation for the theft of an assistance dog. This means that people who rely on assistance dogs to help them perform day-to-day tasks have an additional layer of protection under the law. The bill requires the Scottish Government to collect data on incidents of dog theft and publish and lay that data before Parliament through an annual report. It was clear at stage 1 evidence that better data needs to be collected on incidences of dog theft, and I was pleased to hear Police Scotland are already taking steps to do this. Collecting reliable data and reporting to Parliament on that data represents good public sector governance and ensures transparency. My bill also requires the Scottish Government to review the Act after 5 years and report to the Parliament on the operation of the Act. This allows legislative successors to decide whether the Act is working effectively and, if it is, to consider whether it would be appropriate to extend the provisions to other animals. I have always considered that post-legislative scrutiny is something we need to get better at in this Parliament, and my bill embeds it in this area. I would also like to thank the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee for its excellent scrutiny and Stage 1 report, and I thank all stakeholders who gave evidence to the committee and indeed those who earlier in the process responded to the consultation on my bill proposal. I welcome the scrutiny by the Lead Committee, as well as that by the DPLR Committee and the Finance and Public Audit Committee. The Lead Committee's report is balanced, rigorous and fair, and I am pleased at the Lead Committee's unanimous support for the general principles of my bill at Stage 1. This shows it is not a partisan issue. I also welcome the committee's conclusion that a standalone statutory offence would recognise that dogs are sentient beings and reflect the impact on animal welfare associated by their theft. This affirms the case that stakeholders have been making for some years now. I also wholeheartedly welcome the committee's recommendations around the general principles of the bill. Moreover, I am giving consideration to further recommendations from the committee, and I would like to extend an open invitation not to just members of the committee, but indeed the Scottish Government and the Minister, where we've had a series of productive meetings thus far, as well as to stakeholders, in order to refine the bill at Stage 2, should it pass Stage 1 tonight. So in conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, I look forward to the debate and addressing members' comments when I'm summing up, and I move the motion in my name that the Parliament agrees to the general principles of the Dog Theft Scotland Bill.
Thank you, Mr Golding. I now invite Siobhan Brown, Minister, around 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I want to begin by thanking Maurice Golding for his constructive engagement on this bill and to the Non-Government Bill Unit for all their continued work on it. Also wish to thank the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee for their Stage 1 report and their recommendations, the vast majority of which I do agree with. Presiding Officer, as a dog lover and a dog owner myself, I recognise and I understand the emotional impact they have on our lives. Our dogs are members of our family, and therefore to lose a much-loved pet or to lose it to theft is a harrowing experience. We're all aware that dog theft is an emotive issue that can have serious consequences for dogs and their owners, and the Scottish Government is well aware of the impact of any owner who has had their dog stolen, and of course we're also concerned about the well-being and the welfare of the dogs that have been stolen. Presiding Officer, I am therefore pleased to say that the Scottish Government is able to support the key components of this bill, which is to make dog theft a statutory offence, as I confirmed to Mr Golding and to the committee earlier this week. However, like the committee, I cannot agree with all the proposals in the bill. Therefore, the Scottish Government's support for the general principles of the bill today is conditional on Mr Golding making changes to the bill at Stage 2, which reflects concerns which have also been raised by the committee in the Stage 1 report. Presiding Officer, if those changes are made, the Scottish Government would be content to support the bill at Stage 3, and as the changes are recommendations in the main of the committee, I'm sure Mr Golding would have been responding to them anyway. But I am pleased to confirm that I have also said that the Scottish Government will be willing to provide support to help with the amendments. Presiding Officer, the bill also provides that the offence of dog theft will be aggravated if the dog taken or kept is an assistance dog, regardless of whether or not the dog is working when it is stolen. The aggravation makes the charge more serious and ensures the court is required to consider whether it makes the sentence more severe. The committee recognised theft of an assistance dog would have serious life-changing impact on its owner, both in terms of the emotional distress and the impact on their independence and their ability to perform everyday tasks as well. The Scottish Government supports the aggravation and will engage with Mr Golden on how best to ensure all dogs who provide support and assistance are recognised within the aggravation, reflecting an ask which was made in the committee's Stage 1 report. Presiding Officer, the bill also provides for victim statements to be available for all dog theft cases. We do not support this provision, neither did the committee. Members, you will be aware that just 2 weeks ago we had the Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Scotland Bill, and we extended the use of victim impact statements to all solemn cases. We remain of the view that this is appropriate, but it should not be expanded to summary cases at this point. Therefore, our support for the bill is predicated on that part of the bill being removed. Presiding Officer, let me now turn to the provision in the bill which would require the Scottish Ministers to prepare and publish annual reports on the operation of the Act, covering extensive detail, including information that is unavailable or difficult to obtain, so makes operationally impossible. More importantly, an annual report would present significant resourcing challenges, and as such, this seems significantly disproportionate to what it would provide. Presiding Officer, whilst I'm against the provision as it stands, I have offered Mr Golden's support on developing a deliverable and an appropriate reporting requirement rather than a recurring annual statutory requirement. Presiding Officer, there is also a provision requiring the Scottish Government to review the Act. Committees of this Parliament are, of course, free to consider any post-legislative scrutiny. For Members' Bill, I consider it appropriate for Parliament to decide on that review, not Government. Therefore, I do not support that provision of the bill. Presiding Officer, let me conclude by congratulating Mr Golden on bringing his bill forward. I know it's a topic close to his heart, and I know that members across this chamber, just as the wider society, recognise the importance of dogs in our families. And as we know, there is a fierce competition amongst MSPs to win the Kennel Club's Dog of the Year competition every year. This bill recognises it is not the monetary value of a stolen pet that matters to an owner. It's not the breed or the pedigree. It's the loss of the member of a family to theft. And by recognising the statutory offence this bill introduced, we are all accepting, as the committee did, that dogs are sentient beings, they do have an emotional impact on their owner, and there is also an impact on the welfare of the dog. I look forward to continuing to work with Mr Golden to ensure the necessary changes are made to the bill so that the Scottish Government can support for general principles which we offer today can lead to continued support at Stage 3. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. I now call Finlay Carson on behalf of the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee. Around 5 minutes. Mr Carson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to speak on behalf of the Rural Affairs and Islands Committee on our Stage 1 scrutiny of Maurice Golden's Dog Theft Scotland Bill. Given the bill's focus, scope and the 237 responses to Maurice Golden's consultation, the committee agreed to a shortened Stage 1 inquiry without issuing a general call for views. Between March and May, we took evidence from key organisations, the Minister for Victims and Community Safety, and finally from Maurice Golden himself. The bill proposes a statutory offence of dog theft, reflecting Maurice Golden's view that the common law offence of theft does not adequately recognise the emotional significance of dogs as sentient beings. Organisations such as Guide Dogs for the Blind, Dogs Trust and the Scottish SPCA supports this view, arguing that current law treats dogs as a mere property. Police Scotland also agreed that the common law fails to reflect the emotional and welfare impacts on families and pets. The committee supports the creation of a standalone offence, recognising dogs as sentient beings and acknowledging the emotional harm caused by their theft. While Maurice Golden believes that a statutory offence would act as a deterrent, Police Scotland, the Crown Office and the Minister do not believe it would change how offences are investigated or prosecuted. The committee also noted the absence of a dedicated awareness-raising budget, which we previously identified as crucial in Christine Graham's bill. Without such a campaign, the deterrent effect is likely to be limited. We welcome the Scottish Government's expert advisory group on dog control and welfare and recommended that Maurice Golden explores awareness-raising opportunities if the bill progresses. The committee is content with the three defences outlined in sections 1, 2 and to 4. We also consider concerns about dog theft in the context of domestic abuse. Witnesses agreed that prosecutions under existing domestic abuse legislation are sufficient, and the committee concluded that further measures would fall outside the bill's scope. The penalties proposed in the bill align with those available under common law in the Sheriff Court, but are lower than those available in the High Court. Section 2 was an aggravated offence for assistance dogs. Well, Section 2 proposes that the theft of an assistance dog can be treated as an aggravated offence. The committee recognises the serious, life-changing impact that such a theft would have on the owner. This provision was strongly supported by witnesses, including guide dogs for the blind, who emphasised that these dogs are highly trained working animals providing essential mobility support. However, we noted that there had been no recorded cases of assistance dog theft in Scotland. And courts already consider the impact of crimes during sentencing, so it's unclear whether the provision is proportionate. If the bill progresses, we recommend reviewing the definition of assistance dog to ensure it includes all dogs providing support and assistance. We are content with the use of the negative procedure for any regulations related to this definition. While the theft of a working dog, such as a sheepdog, may not have the same life-changing impacts as the theft of an assistance dog, it can still cause emotional distress and disrupt livelihoods. The committee recommends extending the aggravation to include other working dogs. On victim statements, the committee notes that the court already considers the impact of crimes on victims during sentencing. Including victim statements specifically for dog thefts in summary courts could create inconsistencies, as they are not available for other offences. Given the Scottish Government's commitment to expanding victim statements more broadly, we recommend removing this provision at stage 2. Sections 4 and 5 on reporting and data collection. The sections 4 and 5 relate to reporting. While the Minister states these provisions are unnecessary, stakeholders agree that current data on dog theft is inadequate and likely underrepresents the true scale of the issue. However, due to how crimes are currently recorded under the Scottish Crime Recording Standard, a statutory offence alone would not improve data collection. The committee recommends amending the crime recording standards to improve data accuracy, regardless of whether this bill passes. In summary, Presiding Officer, the committee supports the general principles of the Dog Theft Scotland Bill. We believe it rightly recognises the emotional and welfare impacts of dog theft and supports the creation of a statutory offence. However, we have made several recommendations to improve the bill's effectiveness and proportionality, particularly around awareness raising, the definitions of assistance in working dogs and the removal of the victim statement provision.
Thank you, Mr Carson. I now call Damien Halker-Johnson. Around 4 minutes. Mr Halker-Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak today, and can I congratulate my friend Maurice Golden for his dedication and commitment to highlighting this important issue, and for the work that he's done personally to advance it and to keep it on the agenda. It's also a positive that the Scottish Government has given its qualified support to the bill, and that it will hopefully find its place in the statute book before too long. I'm sure that all of us can relate to the emotive issue of dog theft. With the Scottish Government estimating a dog population of between 800,000 and 1 million, it is safe to say there will be many dog owners in this chamber, although I regret to inform the chamber that I'm not currently one of them, although I do hope that may change soon. And I'm always pleased to support events like the Dogs Trust show here at Holyrood, which is always a highlight of the parliamentary calendar, but also serves to promote rehoming of dogs in their care. And I'm particularly proud that not only did my Dogs Trust dog Buster medal in that competition, but he was the very next week rehomed. It's no great struggle either to recognise the bond between people and their dogs. For many, they are part of the family. That was certainly the case with all of our dogs, and I know the loss I would have felt if any of them had been stolen from us. And I see that same bond in my friend's rescue dog, Billy, or Bilbo Doggins, as he's affectionately known. He swapped the mean streets of Bulgaria for a more comfortable life beside the sea outside Edinburgh, and despite his penchant for eating whatever has died or been washed up dead on their local beach, his appalling record on recall and his occasional, or perhaps incessant, barking, he is very much loved part of their family, and especially by their children. That is why the dog abduction is such an abhorrent crime, one that rightly sickens not only dog owners, but wider society. Too often it is combined with other sorts of criminality. Abducted dogs can face horrifying cruelty and neglect. Maurice Golden's bill proposes a significant change to how dog theft will be prosecuted. The chief objection to the bill appears to surround the merit of creating distinct offences to cover conduct that is already criminal. When doing so, we should keep in mind that overlapping offences are far from uncommon and form an essential and long-standing part of our justice system. We use them to draw distinctions in action and intent, to indicate a different punishment is intended, and to lay down a marker to criminals that focus of the law is on them. As much of the evidence so far presented on the bill has discussed, dogs are living, sentient beings. What is being done to them is categorically different to what is being done to a £20 note from somebody's purse or a watch stolen from a risk. The impact on the human is also quite different. The gap they leave in someone's home, not knowing where they are, how they're being treated, that should be reflected in how we address these offences. The relatively new sentencing process guidelines from the Scottish Sentencing Council, of course, recognise a range of criteria for judges in choosing appropriate sentences. Harm is the most applicable, but also the most general. The Law Society of Scotland has taken a neutral view on the question, but points to sentimental value being part of that existing assessment of harm. That too is insufficient in recognising the true extent of harm here. Just as a dog is different from a stolen £20 note or a wristwatch, it's different from an old photograph or a piece of your grandmother's jewellery. Ultimately, it's for this Parliament, rather than the courts, to answer these questions of value and define the boundaries of criminal law, and to reflect the views of society in doing so. I note the Scottish Government's position on adding dog theft to the category offences where a victim statement could be made by the affected parties to the court that form Section 3 of the bill. While I do not take issue with the Minister's explanation in her letter, it is disappointing that the Scottish Government has not found a clear path to allowing this innovation. I have no doubt that victim statements would, for offences of this type, be a positive step in highlighting and representing the harm that was caused ahead of sentencing decisions. Presiding Officer, this bill is well deserving of support. It is in the best traditions of members' bills, highlighting an overlooked issue that is important to people beyond the walls of this Parliament and proposing action. I am pleased that the Scottish Government has recognised this and offered qualified support, and I hope that members around the Chamber will look to endorse the general principles of the bill this afternoon.
Thank you. I now call on Rhoda Grant. Around 4 minutes, Ms Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I also want to acknowledge the work that Maurice Golden has put into bringing forward this bill, because dog theft is an issue. It really causes heartbreak for owners. And it's not only that, it can be really expensive to buy a dog, and that's more so if the breed is fashionable, and therefore that makes the trade in dogs lucrative as well. And there are those who take a dog in the hope that a reward will be offered for its return, or maybe more overtly hold it for ransom. And that causes real distress for owners and families. Pets are very much part of a household, and their loss can be heartbreaking. Dogs can be expensive to buy, and that is costly as well. And we have had several bills through the Parliament about dogs and their welfare, and these bills have all been brought forward by members. And it shows the level of concerns our constituents have with regard to the welfare of dogs. And what is really required is a comprehensive government bill looking at all aspects of dog ownership and related crime. It should cover family pets as well, such as cats that can also be bred in atrocious conditions to meet demand. And pets are often illegally imported, leading to animals becoming unwell, requiring treatment, and that again is a welfare concern. And this trade is so lucrative that it often attracts organised crime, so it needs to be taken seriously. But members' bills are, by their very nature, restrictive, and they can only deal with single issues, and hence we're getting a patchwork approach towards dog welfare. While I commend those who bring forward the bills, I think we need a better approach to these issues that they seek to tackle. And I know the Scottish Government are setting up an advisory group on dog control and dog welfare, and I hope this means that we'll see better, more comprehensive legislation in the future, and that just doesn't become a talking shop. One of the issues in the bill that I think needs a further scrutiny and maybe some clarity is one of the defences under the bill, because it doesn't cover animals, dog theft within a broken down relationship. And that's understandable, because like any joint property of a relationship, that ownership needs to be negotiated. However, concerns were expressed about a pet dog being used to further perpetrate domestic abuse. A dog stolen by an abusive partner can cause distress, and it can also exercise control over the victim again. And while I think we all agree that this bill can't deal with domestic abuse, and it shouldn't, it would be helpful if the Minister would confirm that there's nothing in this bill that would actually interfere with existing domestic abuse law, and that is already covered, that coercive control in existing legislation. The bill introduces the aggravation for the theft of an assistant dog, and that's extremely rare, but it's right that the bill recognises the impact of such a crime. The Government, in its response, refuses to look at other situations where such an aggravation might be useful, because dogs are used to provide assistance in other ways. Police service use dogs, as do search and rescue services. Sheepdogs can be very expensive to buy and train, and are also essential to farmers and crofters and their animal welfare. So while decisions about adding aggravation need further consideration, we must have the ability to add them under the bill, and that's welcome. Presiding Officer, while this bill is limited, as are all members' bills, we believe that with awareness raising it can shine a light on the heartbreak caused by the theft of a dog, and it will be another tool in the armoury of the police to deal with organised crime. Therefore, we will be supporting the bill at stage 1 today.
Thank you, Ms Grant. And I call Mark Ruskell again, around 4 minutes. Mr Ruskell.
Presiding Officer, and can I start by acknowledging the hard work and effort the member, his team and stakeholders have put into getting the bill to this stage. It's not to be underestimated. And I know that animal charities have spent many years calling for dog theft to be a specific offence in Scotland, as it's felt that the current legal framework is inadequate. And I think, as we've heard already, the current framework classes pets merely as property. So the theft of a pet has the same legal standing as the theft of personal property like a phone or a TV. But the theft of a pet is a fundamentally different crime. Pets are members of our families, and whilst the theft of a TV is obviously distressing, it doesn't come with the same anxieties or grief felt with the theft of a beloved pet. There's an even more significant impact if an assistance dog is stolen, as this can have a life-altering impact on those who rely on them, and this potential for heightened harm isn't accounted for within the current law. We do therefore support the principles set out in the bill to make the theft of an assistance dog an aggravated offence, to reflect the more serious impact this would have on the owner, in order to make sure that this specific principle covers all dogs who provide assistance and support. We agree that an amendment should be brought forward at stage 2, as outlined by the Minister in most recent correspondence with the committee, and I look forward to those amendments being brought forward, and also potentially other amendments that would potentially widen this definition further to other working dogs. As the Dogs Trust highlight, the current legal framework disregards the sentience of dogs and the importance of that human-canine bond. It also puts a greater emphasis on financial value than emotional value of dogs and treats them merely as commodities. With only 1 in 5 dogs reported stolen being returned to their families and a chronic under-reporting of dog thefts, it is clear there is a case for change through this law. But while the bill is rooted in good intentions and the Greens are content to support the principle at stage 1, there are some areas that should be addressed as it progresses. In particular, dog theft is covered in current common law, and while we know it is not a perfect system, we need to be absolutely clear that this bill will make a tangible difference. One thing that was repeated by witnesses in the committee is the view that a standalone statutory offence wouldn't necessarily be an effective deterrent for dog thefts in Scotland, as the proposed penalties are similar to those already outlined in common law. Now, if we look south of the border, since the introduction of the Pet Abduction Act, The numbers of dogs reported stolen has dropped by 21%, but whether this is as a direct result of that bill or not is unclear, and especially when we factor in the data collection issues that exist around dog theft. So, if the intention of this Parliament is to align with that Act, then this bill would need to be broadened, and it would need to include cats and other animals typically kept as pets. And charities, including Cats Protection and Blue Cross, have called for this. The bonds between owners and their pet cats and the feelings of anxiety and distress if they're stolen are not different from those of dog owners. They also deserve access to justice if they are victims of theft. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, I'm of course aware that there are a number of other members' bills in this session of Parliament that relate to dogs. And I think with hindsight, it might have been better perhaps for the government to bring forward, as Rhoda Grant has already outlined, a kind of consolidating bill to bring different aspects of animal law together. But we are where we are, and I think in the months to come, I hope that a shared legacy of members in this session will be a really significant improvement in the lives of dogs in Scotland. And I hope that this bill can certainly play a part in that.
Thank you, Mr Roskell. We now move to the open debate. I call first Christine Graham, to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Around 4 minutes. Ms Graham.
Thank you very much. Deputy Presiding Officer, I congratulate my colleague on his persistence in bringing forward this bill. I know what it takes. We have come a long way from when we failed as the highest of the animal species to recognise that animals are sentient beings, though dogs throughout the centuries could attest to the fact that the word dog and friend is by no means an accident. My late Irish setter Roosty was my best comfort when times were tough. She taught my sons much about being respectful to animals, and as she toasted herself by the fire, she let them use her as a pillow. I miss her to this day. I know the bill has been introduced in the context of a rise in the levels of dog theft since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, when demand far outstretched supply and there was growing evidence of systematic dog theft through organised crime. I thoroughly agree with this being a standalone offence, and indeed with a statutory aggravation if it's an assistance dog, though I would add in working dogs. I note the committee was of that view. I met that issue about the definition of working dogs during the passage of the Welfare of Dogs Scotland Act, but I am certain that definition is not insurmountable. We all know a working dog when we see one. I've noticed the purpose of the bill, and I quote inter alia, to create an offence of dog theft, to provide for a statutory aggravation of that offence, close quote. There is nothing there to prohibit a section in that purpose on including working dogs. And I hear others, so I was going to be minded to do that at stage 2, but I think others will be doing it before I get to the starting gate. But I remind the Chamber, if that requires additional evidence, that can be taken at stage 2. That would be a new section, but as I've said, it would be competent within the purpose of the bill. We know what a pet dog is, we know what an assistance dog is, we should know what a working dog is. These are dogs bred and trained for a specific purpose, performing tasks to assist humans in various roles. They possess key traits like intelligence, loyalty and alertness. They require consistent training and care to thrive in their roles. Sheepdogs, sniffer dogs for drugs, explosive, cadaver dogs to detect buried corpses, dogs trained to locate the living. They have an added value, though for reasons I think the Chamber will understand. I suspect stealing a police dog might be a bit of a challenge for a thief. Thank you.
Finlay
yes,
Carson.
I will take intervention.
I very much appreciate the member giving way. I wonder, given her experience of dog legislation, why she believes the government are reluctant to include working dogs as part of this legislation.
Christine Graham, I can give you the time back.
Well, it's up to us to persuade the government. I'm sure between us and with the member in charge of the bill, we might make progress. I just put that down as a marker. I have no problems because I'm retiring next year. I'm free. However, like the committee, I do not support the requirement for a victim statement about the effect of the crime on them. This is not mandatory in other theft offences, and the court does have the flexibility to permit a victim statement subject to the court's discretion. I like the word discretion in court. I do not support annual reporting. That's the province of the parliamentary committees to make space for post-legislative scrutiny. And there is an argument, been a long time here, that we should have a committee which simply does that, does post-legislative scrutiny. I do support the theft of a dog or puppy being recorded by the police as a specific category. Facts give you power. And again, I congratulate the member and wish him well as it moves, I hope, through to stage 2, but I'm sure it will, where I might well meet him and some others. It appears will be a crowded field. So I support the general principles, and I know other comments, but we do, I think, need a consolidating bill to take in all the dog welfare legislation we've done. There's nothing worse for a lawyer, and I'm a former lawyer, in having to pick your way through little separate bits of legislation. Let's have a consolidation bill in the next Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. I now call Rachel Hamilton to be followed by Emma Harper. Around 4 minutes, Ms Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What strange conversations we have when we're discussing a bill involving furry creatures. Jamie Halker-Johnson's just showed me a picture of his black cat called Squeaky Biscuit. My brother's dog is a rescue dog from Ukraine. It's much loved but paranoid and very anxious. And I have 2 dogs, Pippa and Alfie. In fact, Alfie's dead. I've got Ollie now. And they're, I know, it's horrible. It's a horrible thing when you lose a dog. I have 2 dogs and they're pretty unruly because we live in the countryside. And when I take them on an urban walk and they misbehave, I say that they are rescue dogs like my brothers from Ukraine. But I am working on their behaviour. I just wanted to bring the chamber back to the concept of returning home to find that your dogs are no longer there. I arrive home, I know my dogs are there because I drive along round the corner of the house and they're barking, and to me that's reassuring. When I turn the key, they're there, they're excited, they're giving me an unfettered, warm welcome, and it's lovely. But this was not the case for my constituents, Georgie and Eddie Bell, and both of their daughters. And in 2018, they had their dogs stolen, 2 lovely border terriers. If I remember rightly, they were called Beetle and Ruby. And they launched this big campaign. They had lots of posters around the borders. They offered a reward, and Georgie posted daily blogs. They were totally beloved dogs. They also had a bit of a setback because a couple of months after the disappearance of Ruby and Beetle, they had a mystery call from a gentleman from Galway in Ireland who said that he had the dogs. But sadly, it was a hoax and it was an attempt at extortion, which was desperately upsetting because the family would then once again left heartbroken. But many years on, the family still hold the belief that they will have their dogs returned, and Ruby and Beetle would now be 12 and 9. So why does Maurice Golding's bill matter? Because stealing a dog is treated in the same sense as stealing a handbag, or as Jamie Halker-Johnson said, stealing £20. But a dog is not materialistic, and it's not an inanimate object. Whilst a handbag may bring joy to some people, a dog brings loyalty and it brings companionship, and for many it can bring independence, security and safety. It can also bring an income if we're talking about working dogs. And pet theft is on the rise because we've talked about this in the past. The pandemic saw an uplift in a demand for puppies. The current law does fail to consider the emotional value of a dog whilst not doing enough to collect accurate data, support owners or deter thieves, and in fact put the victims at the heart of the trauma that they go through. Gathering accurate data will absolutely 100% give a clearer picture of where we are with the problem, and proper reporting is also very important, and a review of how the law is working. And furthermore, the bill makes dog theft a specific criminal offence with penalties up to 5 years in prison, as we've heard. And this will send, I believe, a clear message to criminals, even though some people have said that we all already have a standalone offence. However, if we look at the bill in terms of the support that it's got, it has overwhelming support from the majority of animal charities and the police. And the Law Society obviously were slightly sceptical about it, but they remained neutral on it. The last point I'd like to make is that this is about the protection, it's about our victims, it's about justice, it's about love, it's about family. and it's about protecting our loved ones, and I urge everyone to support it. Finally, Presiding Officer, I do believe that we should amend the bill to explicitly reference working gun dogs as requested by BASC, because that is an important part of this bill that we could strengthen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. I feel confident that Jamie Halker-Johnson will not be sharing any further pet details with you in future. I call Emma Harper to be followed by Richard Leonard. Around 4 minutes, Ms Harper.
Presiding Officer, first of all, I would like to congratulate Maurice Golden on getting his Members' Bill this far. I know the hard work it takes for a member and their team, didn't forget the team, to research, create and implement new legislation and work with the attentive, supportive non-government bills team as well. I took forward my own Members' Bill in the last session of Parliament to update the 73-year-old livestock worrying legislation to increase the penalties and protections for farmers whose livestock are chased, attacked or killed by out-of-control dogs. So again, well done, Mr Golden. I'm a Rural Affairs Committee member, Presiding Officer, and I took part in the scrutiny of this bill at stage 1. I will be brief and focus my comments on working dogs and data. There is an argument that dogs need statutory and separate recognition under the law. Stealing someone's guide dog is not the same as stealing a TV, and I agree with members regarding the emotional distress caused by any theft and the sentience of their animals. I have two border collies myself, Presiding Officer, Meg and Maya. Both are now 13 years old and still amazing, great company. Maya won the first Holyrood Dog of the Year in 2017 when she was just 4. Working dogs are highly trained dogs, and these animals are also part of the emotional attachment for their owners and families. You could pick up any farmer in Crofter from tens or thousands and ask how important their dog is to their day-to-day work on the farm, and hear why I think this, at the very least, should be considered. Farm dogs have a unique dual role. They are there to help farmers with their livestock, but they're also part of families and a source of companionship in a job that can often involve long periods of solitude and remoteness. I know the Scottish Government have indicated scepticism of such provisions for working dogs on the face of the bill, but I'm keen to hear feedback from the member in charge or from the Government whether it's a complexity issue of ownership for working dogs or something else. So I'd like to engage in more discussion on that during stage 2 if the vote passes today. I would like to see clarity on the resource implications for the police and judicial services. There will be an increase in burden in terms of record-keeping, data analysis and storage, reporting and training for those involved in implementing the new law. We should still see an estimate of the bottom line before committing to the legislation. If we are to have a specific offence of dog theft in statute, I want to see our public service having the time and the resources to investigate and prosecute offenders. On data collection, Presiding Officer, it was interesting to hear about current data collection practices, and this is reflected in the Stage 1 report. Paragraph 96 of the report highlights that there is currently no requirement of incidences, charges, prosecutions and convictions to be recorded specifically as dog theft. The result is that there is no reliable data on the extent of how much dog theft takes place. The general view expressed by stakeholders was that it would be helpful if provisions in the bill improved the type of data collected, including related to any trends in specific breeds that are stolen. It is important to note that Police Scotland, in a submission to committee, stated that introduction of a standalone offence of dog theft would not enhance accuracy of crime reporting, as dog theft may be committed in the commission of another crime, such as housebreaking, and in that case it would be recorded as robbery or theft by housebreaking, as opposed to dog theft. So if this Members' Bill proceeds, the Scottish crime recording standard would need to be amended, and the committee's recommendation was that even if the bill doesn't pass, amending the crime recording standard would enable better data collection around dog theft. So I'm conscious of the time, Presiding Officer. To conclude, I will support the general principles of this bill at decision time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Harper. I now call Richard Leonard to be followed by Eleanor Whittam. Around 4 minutes. Mr Leonard.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to speak in support of the principles contained in this bill and commend Maurice Golden for bringing it to this stage. This is a bill which I view not as a matter of crime and punishment, but as a matter of compassion and decency. I've come to dog sharing and companionship quite late in life, and it's come about as a result of sadness and loss rather than by design. But through it, I have learned much of joy and of hope, of humility and of responsibility, gained an understanding of our interdependency, shared the blessing of unconditional loyalty and love, as well as being required to find out what the world looks like on a dog walk at 5:30 every morning. So, for me, this bill is about human rights and our physical and mental well-being, but it is also about animal rights and animal welfare too. It is about encouraging the better side of human nature, which is precisely what this Parliament should always be about. So today we are being asked to make a political decision, and in due course we may be asked to pass a law based not on expediency or short-term popularity, but on values and principles. We know that this bill will not end dog theft. It will not solve every problem, but the people who elect us need to be heard, and they need to be listened to, and they are telling us that they want us to act. The creation of these statutory offences is backed by the Dogs Trust, the Scottish SCPA, the Guide Dogs for the Blind and Blue Cross, who are in Parliament this week. We need to be clear as well that we are not pioneers here, that we are in the slipstream of others, and that means that we need to have the grace to learn lessons from those who have gone before us. So I remain open-minded about whether or not the terms of this legislation should be limited to dogs. Dogs are sentient beings. They are not kept property, as the existing common law covering dog theft would have it. Yes, I will do, yes.
Christine Graham.
Unfortunately for the member, you have to look at the purpose of the bill, and it is about dogs. So you're afraid you can't introduce another lot of animals. Wouldn't be competent.
Richard Leonard.
Well, I have just said that we also need to listen to our constituents and what they are telling us. So we can deal with that matter at stage 2, perhaps. I think the point I am trying to make here is that dogs are not kept property. They are sentient beings. They know when their routines are disrupted, when their lives are turned upside down, and when they are no longer with the people who love and care for them. But I'm open to persuasion that that might be applied to other animals too. I hope the bill will also give consideration to something which I've raised in Parliament before, and that is to the stress, anxiety, injury and cost when there is an attack on one dog by another, as raised in petition PE 1892 by my constituent Evelyn Baginski. It's already an aggravating factor if any dog theft is part of organised crime, so I can also see the case made in this bill by Maurice Golden for making it an aggravated offence if an assistance dog is deliberately targeted. I also believe that a victim impact statement would undoubtedly assist those charged in our justice system with determining how to respond proportionately to the real effect, not least emotionally, physically and mentally, of dog abduction or theft. But I do remain to be convinced about some of the lengthy custodial sentences which are floated as options in this bill. A change in the law will require to be resourced if it's to be enforceable. We will need good data and so proper reporting and recording as well. And we will need to keep its effectiveness under review. But these, in my opinion, should all be a routine part of what this Parliament does with all of the legislation that it passes. The loss of a dog under any circumstances is unconscionable and unbearable. The loss of a dog through a deliberate act of theft is unconscionable and unacceptable, and we should simply not tolerate it. That's why today I will be voting in favour of this bill at stage 1.
Thank you, Mr Leonard. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Eleanor Whittam, around 4 minutes. Ms Whittam.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I am speaking in support of the general principles of Maurice Golding's proposed dog theft bill, and in doing so I want to focus my remarks on whether to include an aggravator where a dog is weaponised as part of a broader pattern of coercive control in cases of domestic abuse. Having worked for Women's Aid supporting survivors of domestic abuse, I have long advocated for a trauma-informed approach to justice and policy making. And it is through that lens that I urge us to consider the lived experiences of survivors, particularly women and children, who have been subjected to domestic abuse, where the family pet becomes another tool of manipulation, fear and control. We know from survivor testimony and from research conducted by organisations such as the Dogs Trust Freedom Project that pets are often used by abusers to exert power and control. In my previous work, I saw harrowing examples where beloved animals have been stolen or harmed, with abusers threatening to kill or get rid of a pet unless a woman returns home, or even using the custody of a dog as leverage in post-separation abuse. One survivor described to me how her partner would remove her dog from the house for days at a time when she tried to leave, only returning it when she complied. This is not just theft. This is not just cruelty. This is a continuation of abuse, and it must be recognised as such in law. And thankfully, the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act 2018 recognised the pernicious nature of coercive control and set it out as an aggravator in domestic abuse prosecutions. However, currently, there is no specific data available in Scotland for the number of prosecutions combining domestic abuse coercive control with actions against a pet. Whilst coercive control is now finally a crime under the Domestic Abuse Act, and animal welfare laws can address cruelty, there is no specific legal offence or statistical category that links these two aspects together, making it difficult to track such prosecutions. The legal system does not currently collect data that specifically cross-references domestic abuse charges with instances of animal abuse. Currently, perpetrators can be prosecuted for separate offences, but we have absolutely no real understanding of how many have been prosecuted specifically for harming a pet to further their abuse of the survivor and any children involved. Deputy Presiding Officer, please believe me when I tell the Chamber that I have witnessed far too many occasions when a woman has had to leave the safety of refuge to return to her abuser with her children due to his treatment of the family dog and the desperate pleas from her children. Therefore, I urge the bill's proposer and the Scottish Government to consider an aggravation for offences committed in the context of domestic abuse, or indeed the explicit linking up of the two currently separate offences, as this would signal that our legal system recognises the full range of abusive behaviours and that it will not ignore the suffering caused by the theft, harm or manipulation of companion animals to the animal's owner and also to the pet itself. Finally, Presiding Officer, I take on board what my colleague Christine Graham has said, but I also want to raise concerns voiced clearly and compassionately by the Cats Protection League and others, who rightly point out that cats must not be forgotten in our legislative response. Cats, like dogs, are deeply loved members of households, and they too are used in coercive contexts. They too are stolen, harmed or used to manipulate. And whilst the bill does focus on dogs, it is important that any aggravator related to domestic abuse must be species neutral, because abuse doesn't discriminate and neither should the law. Let this bill, through careful scrutiny and amendment, reflect the lived realities of those facing abuse. Let it say clearly you cannot use someone's animal against them and expect the law to look away. And I would be devastated if someone stole my wee black and tan Jack Russell Mojo, or Mr Mojo Rising, to give him his full title. I too love it when I get home on a Thursday night and he's waiting in the hallway for me, much more than any of the other members of my family. It's the dog who's waiting for me. I support the general principles of this bill, and I look forward to working with colleagues across the Chamber to ensure that it offers real protection, not just to the animals, but to the people who love them.
Thank you, Ms Whittam. We now go to closing speeches, and I call first Rhoda Grant. Around 4 minutes, Ms Grant.
Yeah. Thank you, Presiding Officer. And it's been an interesting debate, and it's good to see so much agreement around the Chamber about how this bill is being viewed. Richard Leonard said it's about compassion and decency, and I think that's right. Not just the welfare of the animal, but the welfare of the owner as well. Others have referred to the pleasure and company that dogs give us. Jamie Halcrow-Johnston and Mark Ruskell said they are a member of the family, and that's so true for those who own dogs. The bill, if anything, needs to raise awareness of this crime. And members don't often have resources to do that, so it would be really good if perhaps government would look at how we raise awareness. I understand they're setting up an advisory group. Could this be something that the advisory group could consider, how we raise that awareness? And Mark Ruskell also said that the UK legislation saw a fall in the number of thefts, but that's difficult to say whether it was as an effect of the legislation or not, and I think that's something we need to have an eye to, especially if we're going to have post-legislative scrutiny. Richard Leonard and Emma Harper talked about other things that we should be looking at with regard to animal welfare. Emma had brought forward her own sheep worrying bill, but Richard talked about dog fighting and organised crime. So I think there is an agreement around the Chamber that there is a need for more comprehensive legislation. And I would join Richard Leonard and Eleanor Whittam in making a plea for cats. I am owned by a cat. That's the difference. And cats need protection as well, although I think they would probably make their own way home if someone decided to take them.
Finlay Carson.
Take the intervention. I just wonder, given Rhoda Grant's position on the Rural Affairs Committee since the start of the session, you probably recognise that there was discussions around a committee bill to look at bringing all the pet legislation together, but the opportunity to do that was just not available given the already heavy burden of legislation, and it should be down to the government to look at a consolidation bill that would indeed include cats and other pet animals.
Rhoda Grant.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I mean, committee time is really constrained, so it's difficult to see. And that's why we don't get post-legislative scrutiny as well, because of committee time. Do I have time to take some?
Yeah. Christine Graham.
I just want to correct, being a cat lover myself, the saying is dogs have owners, cats have staff.
Rhoda Grant.
That is indeed true. My cat tells me what I should do, not the other way around. And I try and tell her what to do, but she doesn't listen. Going back to kind of the seriousness of the bill, a lot of people have talked about data collection, and we really need to get that right. We need to know the scale of the problem and how prevalent it is. Eleanor Whittam also talked about the scale of animal cruelty within domestic abuse. And I know that's maybe not for this bill, but I think it's something we need to record because, yes, it's forcing people back into abusive relationships, but we've all heard of animals harmed or indeed killed by an abuser as a retaliation for someone leaving home. So we need to make sure we know that that can happen. And also, abusive animals can indicate someone who would be abusive to people as well. So there is a read across between them. We need the post-legislative scrutiny, but you know, I am not sure committees have the ability to do it. This bill has a lot of support. The Dogs Trust, SPCA, Blue Cross and Guide Dogs, and indeed many others will support this bill. And I think we're obliged to get this legislation right and try and bring forward better legislation in the next Parliament that brings together the legislation we have, so it's comprehensive and it covers all options.
Thank you, Ms Grant. And I call Sue Webber, again around 4 minutes. Ms Webber.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. As a dog owner, I'm really pleased to be standing up to close for the Conservatives this afternoon. Alfie does make my life complete, and I'm a bit of a convert since we brought Alfie home in February 3 years ago, although I'm gutted that as yet he's only been second in Holyrood Dog of the Year. So yes, Alistair nearly sent him back home, but sent him away. Anyway, the theft of a dog is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to an owner, and the law currently considers it alongside the theft of an inanimate object, which, given what we've heard today, isn't fair. Ms Maurice Golden's bill wants to take into account the welfare impact of the dog theft on both the owner and the dog, and it wants to act as a deterrent to result in much harsher penalties for those found guilty of an offence, and to get more accurate data recording to help identify areas for further interventions. And as we've heard as well, it also brings Scotland in line with England and Northern Ireland when the UK Pet Abduction Act 2024 considers the emotional impact in sentencing. In our General Election Manifesto, we did commit to better protecting dogs against theft, and we also highlighted how much we are committed to animal welfare. Maurice Golden spoke about how interested he was in the principles of justice and how losing a dog to theft compounds that sense of trauma. And it was good to hear from the convener from the lead committee that the Stage 1 report was balanced, rigorous and fair, and that there was unanimous support for that. And we also heard from the member, Maurice Golden, that how open he is to working with everyone to refine the bill further in Stage 2 as we go forward. Yes, it was disappointing to hear about the conditional support offered from the Scottish Government when it comes to the removal of the victim statements and the annual report removal, but that was related to resource issues. But they are committed as the Government to delivering that reportable component in whatever way it might be possible going forward. We also heard about the significance of making it an aggravation for that assistance dog theft and how real the impact on the lives of those people that rely on those assistant dogs. It was good to hear from the committee convener again that dogs are more than property and that it's really important to have that standalone offence of dog theft. Jamie Halcrow-Johnston's comments, yes. I'm glad that but I am delighted to hear that Buster was rehomed after his award-winning appearance and Holyrood Dog of the Year. But he also spoke about something that we haven't mentioned often in here, is about how often those abducted dogs can go on to face some real horrific cruelty. Rosa Grant was looking for the government bill, perhaps, to do something that was more comprehensive in legislation, and Mark Ruskell spoke about how inadequate the current legal framework is. Mr Leonard, I wasn't quite sure what was coming next. I thought we were going to be in floods of tears as you were building up to your comments about the unconditional love that has come to you in your later life, now that you know the benefits of dog ownership, but also the importance of compassion and decency. I really did. I was getting my tissues out over here. But we've had some great stories. We've heard about Buster and, give me the second name here, is Ruby, who the social media content and the campaign to find those two border terriers made it up to Edinburgh as well, so I'm very aware of that. We know the bill has got that overwhelming support from the public, from all the organisations, and it's great to also hear of the cross-party support across the chamber this afternoon. And I'm delighted that we need to accept that the current law right now fails to consider the emotional value that a dog brings, and we need to support owners and deter thieves. So my colleague Maurice Golden's bill addresses these issues by introducing a statutory offence, and we are delighted to be supporting that as it moves forward today from Stage 1. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Webber, and I call on the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. So we are a nation of animal lovers, and many of our households have or look after animals, whether it is goldfish, horse. Animals play a major role in our lives, and how many of us do not even stop to think about patting a dog or a cat as they walk past us. But it is the dogs that go back the longest in our history. They are thought to be among the first animals that humans domesticated and brought into our lives. Then our homes, with estimates of early domestication being between 10,000 to 30,000 years ago. Now dogs are members of just under 30% of households in Scotland. As the contributions have shown today, we can agree that dogs play a major role in the lives of our families and households, as well as wider society, and are very much loved. And we can agree in general that there is very much support for this bill. However, as the debate has indicated, though, there are still important matters to consider, and I have to be clear on the Scottish Government's position. Presiding Officer, I have listened carefully to the speeches and issues raised by members, and I'm sure Mr Golden will reflect on them ahead of Stage 2, and if there's issues raised for ourselves, we will as well, the Scottish Government. But let me just turn to some of the specific issues that we have heard of today, if I can comment on. Rhoda Grant was asking about awareness raising. So the Scottish Government will work with the member to help publicise and raise awareness of the new dog theft offence should it become law. As I made clear to Mr Golden when I met him recently, the Scottish Government already has links with a wide range of stakeholders with a strong interest in dog control and dog welfare policy matters. And as the committee, when I was at the committee appearance, I was talking about the expert advisory group that's up and running and doing some great work at the moment, which hopefully I'll be able to update Parliament on shortly, and I'm happy to get them involved in the awareness raising as well. Moving on to the domestic abuse, and I will get to Elena Whittam's content, but this is covering a bit what Rhoda Grant raised and Elena Whittam, and I know that this was raised in the committee when I was there as well. We know that the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act 2018 created the offence of engaging in a course of abusive behaviour against a partner or an ex-partner, and this includes behaviour directed towards pets or the removal of a pet from the partner or ex-partner where they're likely to cause the victim to suffer physical or psychological harm. And these provisions are not reliant on the need for a specific offence of dog theft. But looking at relationship defence, I do note that the views were offered through the scrutiny in the absence of specific recommendation in the committee report. And given common law theft will continue to apply and can be used where necessary in situations where the relationship defence may arise. We do not now have the view on whether the relationship defence is appropriate. Prosecutors could still continue to ensure dog theft can be addressed using common law powers or theft in any given relevant case. Yes, Christine Graham?
Christine Graham.
It's unfortunate I didn't actually remark on section 1 subsection 2. That's a really tricky section. As a former divorce lawyer, I can assure the Chamber, parties would agree division of the household assets, the bank accounts, but the biggest fight would be about the family pet. And I could see, I agree with many things that Elena Whittam has said, but using the defence that somebody's been abusive so they can keep the dog. I'm just putting that into the pot, because people will try anything sometimes to get what they want.
Minister.
Yes, I thank the member for the intervention, and I'm totally sympathetic to the concerns that have been raised by Elena Whittam. I'm just personally not sure if this is the right bill for that, but it may be something that could be considered. I am also thinking when you... Yes.
Elena Whittam.
I understand the very narrow nature of a member's bill, and it's perhaps not the vehicle for it, as the committee also reflected. But I just feel as if there's a complete lack of link-up between the provisions in the Domestic Abuse Act that actually allow for the prosecution of coercive control in terms of where an animal is used in that space, but there's no actual data that tells us how many times that happens when dog theft happens. So it's just about how that could possibly ever be linked up, I think is my question.
Minister.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's something that I'm happy to take away and meet the member to discuss further. I'm wondering if it's something that the expert advisory group could really maybe even look in, if it's something that's raised with them, and then we could take it from there. But I'm happy to take it away and consider that. If we're moving on to the theft of cats, and I appreciate that all our pets are loved. So the common law offence of theft does offer robust protection, including for pet theft, which includes cats, with a maximum penalty all the way up to life sentence if tried in the High Court. In saying that, and listening to Finlay Carson when he was talking about the evidence that the committee took regarding opening it up to further pets in this bill, I think there are valid points being raised by all members today about consolidation legislation moving forward. Obviously, I think we're all aware we do not have any time in this parliamentary timetable due to the amount of legislation we're trying to pass in the next 7 to 8 months, but I definitely think it's something that should be brought forward in the next parliamentary term. And if I can move on to the definition of an assistance dog to be widened. Now, I understand that the Scottish SPCA previously provided the Rural Affairs and Ireland Committee with research paper on defining the terms used for animals working for support roles. And I'm aware that the committee had concerns about the definition used for assistance dogs. In particular, the issue that may arise is that not all dogs that provide assistance and support for owners would be covered. Although there is an enabling power on the face of the bill that allows for changes of the definition, this would leave the issue for the Scottish Government to address further down the line. And in the conversations that I had with Maurice Gordon last week, I welcome his commitment to bring forward amendments at stage 2 to ensure that appropriate coverage for the aggravation is achieved to dogs that provide assistance to support owners. And this would be a necessary part of the Scottish Government's support for this bill. And I would ask Maurice Gordon to give confirmation of that in his closing speech, if he could. Thank you. Presiding officer, dogs are vital members of our families, much loved, and if they're lost in any way, including theft, leave a hole in those families and grief to their owners. I hope that by supporting the new dog theft offence, I am showing that the Scottish Government takes this issue very seriously. If Parliament agrees to the general principles of the bill today, I look forward to working with Mr Golden at stage 2 to ensure the amendments are made to ensure that the Scottish Government can continue to support to stage 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Maurice Golden to wind up. Some 6 minutes or so, Mr Golden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I thank all members for their contributions today. I think that it has been a good debate, and I welcome the level of engagement on this issue and around the bill from members across the chamber. I also welcome the positive tone of the debate and the fact that many members have indicated their support for the general principles of the bill. I recognise that members, including the committee convener and the Minister, have highlighted particular areas where they consider that the bill should be amended. As I indicated in my opening speech, there are areas where I am happy to look at and indeed lodge amendments, such as removing requirements for victim statements, and I agree with and have agreed with the Minister to look at provisions around the particular definitions around assistance dogs, as well as around both annual reporting and reviews, and I commit to ongoing discussions around that to essentially codify and ensure that the bill is in the best place possible to become an act. And I look forward to doing that in advance of stage 2 proceedings, to get together a set of amendments that ideally the whole committee could agree on. Also, in addition to working with the Scottish Government and the Minister most productively, I am very willing to meet with other members who may have their own ideas for amendments, and I will cover some of those which have been raised in the chamber today. I am really pleased that members are taking this bill so seriously and coming up with constructive suggestions to improve it. I will now turn to the excellent speeches made during this debate. The Minister, who is a dog lover, recognises the seriousness of the crime and highlighted concerns around victim statements, annual reporting, and I am pleased that we have agreed the pathway forward on those points, and certainly that is now on the official report. In terms of the committee and committee convener Finlay Carson, there's really two areas I would like to highlight. First is around awareness raising, and I'm certainly agreed on that point. Whether that really needs to be part of the bill, I would perhaps suggest it's something linked to the bill rather than codified in primary legislation. But I do agree with the substantive point around making sure that the law is publicised, and I'm sure we'll have lots of members in the new session willing to pose with their prize pooches for that purpose. Secondly, on working dogs, I hear the argument, and I've looked at it. I'm not convinced there is a clear case for extension. The existing aggravation in the bill is there to ensure that people who are unable to carry out day-to-day tasks, potentially including being unable to report a crime itself without the support of an assistance dog, should receive the additional protection in law, and therefore expanding that case, well, I think that, yeah, happy to.
Rachel Hamilton.
I understand the point the member's making around assistance dogs, but in a way, a working dog is an assistance dog to a country keeper, for example, on a working shoot, and they do employ many people. We know how strong the countryside sports are in the economy, and they rely on working dogs, and I think it would be foolhardy not to include them within this bill.
Maurice Golden.
Well, I think that's a debate we can have at stage 2. I do think there is a difference between a working dog and an assistance dog, but I do hear the member's case for that. Jamie Halcrow-Johnson, the medalist at Holyrood Dog of the Year, described it as an abhorrent crime, highlighting the horrifying cruelty facing dogs that are stolen. Rhoda Grant described the lucrative trade of stolen dogs and outlined the heartbreak that families experience, and also made the suggestion, which I agree with, of a comprehensive bill covering dog ownerships and perhaps wider around animal welfare. And I think, while this is not something for this session, it should be something for next session, and it should be a government bill, in my view. Mark Ruskell pointed out the current legal framework is inadequate. Christine Graham thoroughly agrees with making a statutory offence, and agreed with my colleague Rachel Hamilton's view on working dogs. In addition, Rachel highlighted the case of border terriers, Beetle and Ruby, who were stolen, and the family are still holding out for their return. Emma Harper highlighted the importance of data collection. Richard Leonard supported the bill on the basis of compassion and decency, and Elena Whittam really brought in a new part of the debate, which I'm very sympathetic to, around dogs being weaponised as part of a coercive relationship, but whether this legislation is the appropriate point for that, I'm less convinced about. So, happy to.
Briefly, as the member must begin to conclude, Christine Graham.
On the point that we're dealing with in that section 1, subsection 2, if I can ask the member just to reflect on that, is probably one of the most difficult things in the bill to do where there's a dispute on ownership between a cohabiting or a married couple.
Maurice Golden.
Yeah, I do think it does stray into an area perhaps beyond the member's bill on dog theft, which is very tight. But I think the point that Elena Whittam made is one that should be addressed urgently. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I hope the members will support the general principles of the bill at decision time tonight, and that we can leave here with a spring in our step and our tails up. And the dog owners and lovers and other stakeholders can be reassured that this Parliament recognises that the theft of a dog is a horrific crime leading to emotional trauma and heartbreak, and it must be treated accordingly by the law. Thank you.